This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome back to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. We are covering minute 95 of the X-Files Fight the Future movie, and I'm your host, Sarah Blair. We begin this minute with 1 hour and 34 minutes on the dot. It's got Mulder in a very precarious position. We don't know what's going to happen. We're going to find out. And this minute ends at 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 59 seconds when Mulder finds something very important. He finds a very, very important clue. What is that going to be? We'll let you know. I'm joined again by Miss Marlene Stemme. Hello, Miss Marlene.
Hey, Sarah.
And your sweet kitty cat.
Maya has joined me for this minute.
Maya. Hi, Maya. Yeah, so Marlene. Mulder is hanging at the edge of this cliff. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, he survives this gigantic fall, and he manages to scooch over to the edge and find solid footing once again, which I find pretty incredible.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty incredible. We already talked about the fall.
Yep.
The incredibility or whatever of the fall.
Implausibility. Yeah.
But yeah, he's able to grab on with one arm. And of course, he's still kind of like looking down because he always has to look to see what's around him. And then he kind of like arms his way over to a place where he can get a foothold. But in my notes, I put like, I don't understand the ergonomics of his situation because it looks like he is just dangling over, precipice of this big chasm, and that he maybe has a place eventually to put his feet, but then he stands on it and then he kind of like just sort of leans over in relief, but I didn't see anywhere that would be a solid surface when he was falling. So I think it's just the way the whole thing is put together is supposed to be a mystery, so you don't know exactly what structurally is where, or where Mulder's going to end up. But it was a what would you call it? A white knuckler, I guess.
Oh, it was so intense. Yeah. I was holding my breath the entire time. I'm so glad that we finally got to this minute because between yesterday and today, I just couldn't breathe the whole time. I didn't know what was going to happen to Mulder.
I know.
I was so worried.
I know.
About Mulder. We just left him hanging there, literally.
Yeah.
And I hate cliffhangers. I am not a fan of cliffhangers at all.
Well, we've had a few in this series because there was, like when he's with the bomb and so forth.
Yeah.
And with the soda machine, all of those things. But this probably is the most it's like a literal in the literal sense of literal cliffhanger.
It is. It is. It's about the most cliffhanger you can get.
It absolutely is.
I've been talking about this a little bit. I mistakenly got really excited. So I thought for about half a minute that Mulder had two flashlights because he drops something when he's hanging off this cliff here. Mm-hmm. And it kind of glints a little bit. And I was thinking like, oh, that's a flashlight. But no, it's not a flashlight. It's his binoculars, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think the idea that he has two flashlights is interesting because we, saw in the show like way earlier on that he started carrying two guns because he would always drop one and lose it. So the idea that he would remember and be like, oh, I lose my gun. But now the flashlight is what matters. So I should have two flashlights the same way I have two guns. Makes some sense. But in fact, he wasn't that prepared. It's the binoculars.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to get shippery for a second. Forgive me. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay. I'll see what
I know you're a no Romo, and that's okay. Everybody's got their own thing. Just like stick your fingers in your ear for a second.
Okay.
Okay. So I was thinking, how romantic is it that he brought a flashlight for himself and a flashlight for Scully?
I don't think that needs to be shippery. I mean, it could be if you really, really want it. Because it's thoughtful. Like the clothing situation that we don't cover.
It's so thoughtful. He loves her so much that he has this hope that she's going to be fine when he finds her.
Okay.
And
So you thought he brought the flashlight for her.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like, I'm going to go get Scully, and she's going to need a flashlight, too, because she's going to be fine, and it's all going to be okay, and we're going to get out together, and she's going to have a flashlight. So I'm going to bring a flashlight for her, too. But no.
I like the idea of him bringing a flashlight for her.
Yeah.
I also think had he had to, which he didn't, but had he had to, it would be because he knows that he loses things.
Yeah. I think both could work.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have two flashlights, it turns out.
He just has one of each thing, apparently. The thing I like about the binoculars, it being the binoculars that he drops, is that he's just used the binoculars to locate, to the magical binoculars, I believe you called it 2 minutes ago, to see among all of the machinery and all of the orchestration and the, this whole system that's going on. He found that one singular pod that was Scully's, I'm going to call it like a transport pod, I guess, that had carried her there. And so he's found what he needs to find with the binoculars, and so he loses the binoculars. And in an earlier minute, when he's driving across the ice for, looks like forever, and I think that's the feeling we went to have, in the snowcat, and then the snowcat runs out of gasoline, but he's in a place where he can run, across the ice to get, he's trying to find the coordinates where he needs to be, and then of course he falls, and that takes him where he needs to be. So it's like he loses the snowcat when the snowcat really isn't useful, even though he didn't know that. He loses his footing in the ice when running on the ice is no longer useful, like he doesn't need to be what he's doing, and then he loses his binoculars once those are no longer useful. So it's like all of these things become artifice and are falling away. So that's my interpretation of the binoculars.
I like that. I like that a lot. And it's also very, very, very convenient.
That too.
Like what we talked about with Chris Carter and his convenient plot points.
Yeah. Because he talks about the binoculars falling, and I believe in that very interesting novelization that you read in the last minute, that was part of it too, that the binoculars are falling and they just like keep falling. There's no real end to this big cavern over which he was dangling. So. Mm-hmm.
It's very effective. Mm-hmm. I mean, it does, like in when you're watching, it does show you, like, hey, this is a really big space. So I think that the binoculars falling definitely are a useful device to show the space and the scope of just what's gaping below him.
Yes.
So after Mulder gets to the bottom of this place, he still has to go down like one more level. So he kind of like slides down again. And that's when he pulls out his actual flashlight that he's got, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he walks along this corridor and he kind of goes to the, magically, again, this enormous slide experience has taken him to exactly the spot that he needs to be. He doesn't have to, run around searching. He's just automatically in the right hallway or corridor place that will lead him directly to this cryopod thing.
Yeah.
And so he goes and he's looking around. Does it show anything that's in the pods that are along the walls, or do we just see him go straight to it? We don't see any of that yet.
So first he kind of, I was going to say with the, he kind of walks across the track. He slides down this like big cylinder, and there's like this blue light. It's almost like it's its own tunnel. And then that's when they show the transport pod that housed Scully. I think it's really interesting the way they film the pod that Scully has been in, because we're sort of looking at it like straightforward and a close up. And then with like, it has 2 oxygen tanks on it and so forth. And then you see Mulder coming from the other side and see his flashlight beam shining through it. I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
The way the approach is made. And we can kind of see her clothes too as he's walking up to it.
Yes. And, as much as it's convenient and everything else, I like how they did this because, it does make it easier for him to find, because it stands out as the fact that this is this hastily abandoned pod. But it also shows that they were in a big hurry to get her out of there and get her in this thing.
Yeah, that's true.
I like the sense of urgency that it presents, that they just left everything, they dropped everything, they got her out, they got her in this pod, and just left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't clean up.
Right.
They didn't do anything. So I appreciate that it shows that they were in a rush.
I hadn't thought about that. That's true, though. Yeah, because Mulder walks around, and then I guess he sort of like comes around to the near side of the container, and then he just sort of touches Scully's clothes at the end of the minute. So it is like everything was just left there. I hadn't thought about it in terms of the other, like the, you know, abductors or whatever being in a hurry, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it's kind of creepy, too. Just like abandoned clothes just kind of creep me out in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because it's like something that somebody wore like on their body, like the closest thing to someone's body.
Yeah.
And if they're gone, it's got like an eerie kind of feel. Like abandoned clothes are just...
It's like a shell.
Yeah, exactly. Like this empty shell. So you really get that sense of loss, I think, too.
Yeah, that's a good
by seeing her clothes.
And he knew that's all she had, too. It's not like he
Yeah.
found her jacket somewhere or something like that. Like that's, you know, it's all just like right there in this pod. So they would have just like ripped her out of that.
So I think that kind of emphasizes that she's missing, and it creates that sense of urgency that he really needs to find her. So at the very end of this minute, we get Mulder finding her necklace with the cross on, the gold cross necklace.
That's pretty much
And
then.
so, yeah, that's like where the minute ends. So that's like its own cliffhanger too.
Yeah. And a good symbolic ending, I think, as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we will leave it there and come back next time when Mulder gets Scully's necklace and begins his search for his partner. So, all right, that does it for minute 95 of Fight the Future. And until next time, everyone, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The giddy carousel of pop.
So there's just one thing we need to know. Where were you on the 13th of July 1985?
I definitely watched the whole of Live Aid, sat 2 inches away from the telly. My mum and my stepdad and my stepsister coming in and out and trying to prise me away from the telly and not really managing.
I was in Wembley. I took a day off work. They didn't believe I was going. I had to show them the ticket.
Went to a dog show at Malvern. And saw Auntie Sandra and Uncle Jeff.
I was there. Me and a school friend went. My mum and dad drove us down. They had a day in London. We went to the concert.
The Movie Palace.
So, Carl, what is White Heat about for you?
For me, it's about where the gangster genre is at this point in time. And I think one of the interesting things to look at with gangster films is always like, how do they take the temperature of the time that they're made? So I suppose it comes at a very interesting time in terms of like globally, doesn't it? You know, you have the proclamation of the People's Republic of China, you have the Soviet Union testing the atomic bomb, stuff like that, you know. So there's something interesting about this film, which ends with this big explosion at the chemical factory, which comes along at this time of like nuclear tension.
Between the Notes.
I think it's important to remember throughout the 1990s into the early 2000s, there were loads and loads of chill-out albums that were released, like repeatedly. They were all over the place. My dad always used to collect those. He used to buy them. And Morricone was always on those, which is another sign of how remarkable he was. He could cross over into the mainstream populist sphere, and the score for The Mission was always on those albums, particularly Gabriel's oboe, which is an interesting story. I looked this up. So Jeremy Irons plays the character of Gabriel in the movie, and he performs the oboe. Well, he mimes playing the oboe in the film, and then that's obviously overdubbed with the music.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.